Hi, econ students. There have been some questions on the terms of trade question from the homework on interdependence and the gains from trade. So I thought I would do an example of that problem and hopefully help you out. And so here's a problem. Suppose that Italy and France both produce wine and cheese. Italy's opportunity cost of producing a pound of cheese is 2 bottles of wine, while France's opportunity cost of producing a pound of cheese is 6 bottles of wine. Who has a comparative advantage in cheese? It's clear that Italy does because Italy's opportunity cost of producing a pound of cheese is lower than France's. And so Italy only gives up 2 bottles of wine for a pound of cheese, while France gives up 6 bottles of wine for a pound of cheese. So you see that Italy has a lower opportunity cost of producing cheese. Therefore, Italy has a comparative advantage in producing cheese and should be the one that specializes in the production of cheese. That means that Italy is going to produce only cheese. Italy is not going to produce any wine. And so who has a comparative advantage in wine? Well, France does. And so uh, France has a lower opportunity cost of producing wine than Italy does. And so it gives up less cheese for each bottle of wine than Italy does. And so one way to look at this that can make things clearer is to draw graphs of the production possibilities frontier. So we're going to draw a production possibility frontier for Italy and for France. And so for Italy, if Italy moves from point A to point B along its production possibility frontier, here I'm depicting a situation where Italy is going to get 1 additional pound of cheese. So as Italy moves from point A to point B on the production possibility frontier, it's going to be producing 1 additional pound of cheese. And so to be able to do this, it has to give up 4 bottles of wine. And so Italy's giving up 4 bottles of wine to produce 1 additional pound of cheese. And so this implies that the slope of the production possibility frontier for Italy is 4. The absolute value of the slope is 4. This is showing the rate at which Italy gives up wine for cheese is 4 bottles of wine for each additional pound of cheese. For France, if France moves from point A to point B, it also obtains 1 additional pound of cheese. So it's producing 1 additional pound of cheese. And to do this, it has to produce 6 bottles less of wine. It's going to have to give up 6 bottles of wine to produce 1 additional pound of cheese. And so this implies that the slope of the production possibility frontier for France is 6. And so you see the slope of the production possibility frontier reflects the opportunity cost of the good on the x-axis. And so we saw that the opportunity cost of producing cheese for Italy was 4. And so the slope of the production possibility frontier is 4. And we saw that the opportunity cost of producing cheese for France was 6 bottles of wine. And so the slope of the production possibility frontier shows this. The slope is 6, showing that France gives up 6 bottles of wine for each pound of cheese. And so we saw that Italy has a comparative advantage in cheese, and so it's going to specialize in the production of cheese. And so we have a purple star on Italy's graph showing that Italy is going to produce all cheese and no wine. And here we have a purple star on France's production possibility frontier showing that France is going to produce all wine and no cheese. Now, how's Italy going to get, if Italy's producing all cheese, how's it going to get some wine? It needs wine. To do that, it's going to trade. And it wants to trade in such a way that it will be better off than it would be if they were producing their own wine and their own cheese. And so they want to trade in a direction here where they're actually taken outside of their production possibility frontier. A country cannot produce outside of its production possibility frontier, but it can, after producing within its production possibility frontier, it can trade outside of the production possibility frontier, showing that it's actually made better off through trade. And so this green line is showing a rate of trade that takes Italy outside of its production possibility frontier. And so again, it'll produce within its production possibility frontier, but it'll trade at a rate where they'll be able to actually consume outside of their production possibility frontier. And so for instance, if Italy, when it gives up 1 pound of cheese to France, if it received 5 bottles of wine, it would move outside of its production possibility frontier. And if this line was depicting that situation where for every pound of cheese that it gave to France, they received 5 bottles of wine, then this terms of trade line, this green terms of trade line, would have a slope in absolute value of 5. Okay, so what's in this situation, what's France doing? Again, France is producing all wine, no cheese. It wants some cheese, so it's going to give up some wine to Italy in exchange for cheese. And so what if it gave up 5 bottles of wine in exchange for 1 pound of cheese? Well, France, in its own production process, to get 1 pound of cheese, it has to give up 6 bottles of wine if it's producing everything itself. But in trade, if instead of giving up 6 bottles of wine to produce 1 more pound of cheese, it could give up 5 bottles of wine. So less wine, giving up less wine to obtain that 1 pound of cheese. And so you see that in this situation with that green terms of trade line, that's showing that France is also trading outside of its production possibility frontier. It's trading at a rate of giving up 5 bottles of wine for 1 pound of cheese. So this works well for both countries. Both countries are trading outside of its production possibility frontier. And the reason this is working is the terms of trade are greater than 4, Italy's opportunity cost of cheese, and is less than 6, France's opportunity cost of cheese. And so the terms of trade, it needs to be somewhere between 4 and 6. It needs to be greater than 4 bottles of wine per pound of cheese, and it needs to be less than 6 bottles of wine per pound of cheese. For instance, terms of trade of 5 would make both countries better off. Hope this helps. Thank you for listening.